Stay tuned to learn more about student interest in blockchain technology. Reimagine 2020.
I'm Bill Barhydt, founder and CEO at Abra, and let's get ready to reimagine 2020.
Hey everybody, it's Patrick McLain here, your host of Reimagine 2020. I think we have a pretty interesting guest here. I spent some time the last few days reading a bit about what he's written and kind of some past talks he's done. Very excited to be sitting here with Bill Barhydt. Am I not butchering that?
You got that right, Barhydt. Yeah, well done.
He told me it's like a bar stool, bar height. I like bars, so it's
there you go. Can't go wrong with bars.
So introduce yourself, Bill.
Yeah, hey, I'm Bill Barhydt. I'm founder and CEO of Abra, based here in California, where I'm talking to you during self-custody. So yeah, I mean, I'm a long time crypto guy, actually cryptography. So crypto before it was cryptocurrency. I was a cryptographer for the government for many years, then at the CIA, then I engineer at NASA, got the internet bug in the early 90s and kind of made the transition there. And yeah, I've been really doing fintech and then now crypto currency work, Bitcoin work for the last almost 10 years. Yeah.
Got it. So, and I kind of asked you before we started this conversation, but it's safe to say you're technical.
Yes, I think I have a pretty good, reasonable understanding of software technology. Yeah.
As I was kind of reading up a bit about you earlier and watching some of your past conversations, you know, I couldn't tell if you were technical or just really kind of a global thinker. But you know, as I read your resume, I'm reading CIA, U.S. government, NASA, Goldman Sachs, right? And as you're describing it, you know, it's somewhat clear that you're technical, or you feel comfortable describing yourself as that. But you know, where do you kind of see your role in the blockchain space, and how do you kind of think of yourself as a leader?
Sure. Well, I'm probably one of the old guys in this community in my 50s, right? There's not many of us. A lot of the kind of founding CEOs are mostly in their 20s and some in their 30s, I suppose. And I think I bring a broad experience of you know, having run multiple companies, having lived and worked in probably 50 countries at this point, run multiple businesses, and I have I think a very broad kind of multi-pronged perspective on where the global economy is going long term, what the issues are. I've seen many global downturns. You know, I actually remember waiting online for gasoline in the 1970s in the US when we had the oil embargo. Many of you viewers have no idea what I'm talking about. So I think those different perspectives help shape a worldview that might be a little bit broader than, you know, what some of the other folks in the space might have, and hopefully I can bring something to the table with all of that experience.
It sounds like you're bringing wisdom.
I don't know about that. We'll see. The problem with wisdom is that, you know, it's really good to measure when we're all dead. So it's hard to measure wisdom in the moment, right? So so hopefully I can add value in the moment as opposed to measurable value when I'm gone.
The history books will tell us who's right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, they'll do that anyway, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, you know, what were those unique experiences that you had in your past that kind of led you to here? Or if you were to pull a few out, like what would you say are the most relevant?
Well, let's see. So I spent a lot of time traveling the world, working on money transfer and remittance products with a company that I started about 15 years ago. And I learned a lot about how people in developing markets live, how they bank, how they don't bank, how families are dependent upon migrant workers in their families. For example, Mexican farmers in the US sending money back home, Haitian taxi drivers in Miami and Boston sending money back to Haiti, which makes up over 25% of the company's GDP, gross domestic product. How oil workers in the Middle East from India are sending money back, which is one of the largest migrant communities in terms of money transfer in the world, and what this all means to their families, and how the banking system works, how people get left behind from the banking system, how the people who pay the most fees in the banking system are the kind of underprivileged or kind of what we call now unbanked or underbanked sometimes in the fintech community. So people's goals aren't necessarily to have a bank account. Their goals are to survive and thrive. But you need access to certain types of financial services in this type of economy in order to do that. And those people are often left behind. And so that, combined with a lot of the technology work that I've done over the years, worked on one of the first credit card gateways for the internet back in the mid 90s, worked on some of the initial certificate authorities that were enabling web servers to process credit cards securely. So my understanding of that technology, combined with a lot of the things that I would see on the ground for everyday consumers, kind of at the bottom of the income pyramid, really led to my worldviews and shaping what I think needs to happen from a technology perspective and where I want to be able to spend my time in the coming years.
Got it. And actually, I understand some of your point. I mean, I think I was 25 years old, so about a decade ago, I lived in Tanzania and Kenya for many years, right? So seeing what M-Pesa did, or people kind of distributing money digitally from their cell phones, right? It seemed, I think in a lot of ways, people would look at third world countries and say they're not as advanced as us, right? And then you see Venmo come out 6 years later and say, oh, wait, maybe it was already here, right? And maybe it doesn't need to be as complicated as you need it in an app. Maybe it can be as simple as a short code in a Nokia phone, right? That can process.
Both of those examples were very practical. M-Pesa is very practical for the Kenyan consumer. Venmo is very practical for the U.S. consumer, and both solve a problem unique to our domestic audiences, right? Most people in Kenya operate using feature phones, and most people now in the U.S. operate using smartphones. Most people in the U.S. have a bank account. Most people in Kenya didn't have a bank account. And so both services, M-Pesa in Kenya, Venmo in the U.S., basically did what they needed to do to add value in their respective markets, taking advantage of what was already working in those markets.
No, 100%, right? And that's a great point. I think if you look at East Africa, you could be in a bus station and some kid's walking around and he gives you a little scratch card. You scratch it off, you pay him, you enter it into your phone, and that's now transferable money right now. If you would imagine someone doing that in the US, there's like pretty low chance that John or Jane Doe is going to go like buy a scratch card for some kid at the bus station, right? So I guess in saying that, like, well, I guess I have a side question. Like,
sure.
Is your primary, do you think of a blockchain in primarily financial sense, or do you view it also kind of the subset of just decentralized data, decentralized applications? Like, are you more attracted to the financial applications of it?
Well, first and foremost, I see it as software, and which leads to a lot of issues I have with the way it's regulated. Bitcoin is software. Blockchain is a component of that software protocol. Other cryptocurrencies at their heart are just software. And so, all this nonsense that, Bitcoin's a commodity, it's not. It's software that can be used in certain ways. Now, what attracts me to Bitcoin originally was everything I just talked about around, being able to solve problems for consumers, issues with the banking system not being there for everyone. And so this idea that we can remove middlemen, right, from the banking industry, not only in terms of providing banking services, but also in terms of actually creating money. Why don't we have competition to Federal Reserve banks? What gives them the rights to decide that, their bearer instrument is the only bearer instrument we can use as money, right? While Bitcoin itself is just software, it's not money. We can use it as a replacement for traditional money long-term. We can also use it as a replacement for the banking system, the verb that uses the money right? So you have two aspects of this kind of global problem that need to be fixed over time. The first is people's access to banking services, which we've talked about, remittances, other money transfer capabilities, lending, which I think is going to become a big part of the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin ecosystem over the next few years. And then the second, which is government's irresponsibility in inflating the currency over time such that its value.
Hey, I lost you for a minute. I got you back. You hear me, Bill?
Yep.
All right. We're gonna for everyone that's watching, for probably the 20,000 people that are gonna watch this live, and I'm guessing 500,000 people after, we're gonna experience technical difficulties. This is one benefit. I probably couldn't get Bill to speak to me right now in like a stage in New York, but I can get Bill to speak to me in Zoom. So we're gonna experience some benefits over these conversations, and we're gonna have a little bit of technical difficulties. But I got you, Bill.
The new realities of working from home. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I'm interested to see what strain it puts on the internet, actually. Like,
I don't know. I mean, I can tell you my kids were up at midnight local time watching the final episode of Star Wars Clone Wars, and I'm guessing that millions of people around the world were doing the same thing. So God knows what Disney did to the internet last night, and you know, Netflix, Disney, Hulu. I mean,
yeah, I lost you again, Bill.
1980, and there was no internet, right? So there was no Zoom video calls or Google Meets or whatever, FaceTime. There was no home streaming service, no cryptocurrency to talk about, you know, no internet banking. I mean, what a nightmare it would be to, you know, you think about what people must have gone through in 1917, you know, during that pandemic. And we're very fortunate, you know, obviously if somebody's sick and if somebody in your family dies, you don't consider yourself fortunate. But the big picture is that we're very fortunate this is happening now as opposed to 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, no, I think the benefits of connectivity will hopefully like shine right now, right? There'll probably be some negative drawbacks like everything.
Sure.
There's your CIA years will tell you about blowback, right? Like, we're gonna realize some weird. There'll be many anomalies, like a few factors of evolution that kind of spill out of this.
Yep.
But hey, so let me bring to my next question. Like when you think about the last 10 years of blockchain, or when you assess it, you know, did we kind of live up to the promise? Did we not? Was it just never that easy to build and we're evolving? You know, so like, how do you kind of see the progress to date? You know, and then kind of what are your hopes for the next, I guess, you know, 5 years or 10 years?
Sure. A lot of questions in there. So let me break it down. I mean, I guess my first reaction is who's we and what's the promise, right? I mean, somebody put this Bitcoin software out there for us as a gift, and we've taken advantage of it, right? We have built that into an asset class which didn't exist 15 years ago into a $100 billion plus asset class. That is incredible. That's never happened in hundreds of years, to my knowledge. Right? We've had equities for hundreds of years. We've had gold. We've had, you know, other commodities, but this became the first digital kind of asset class. I don't consider it a commodity, but you can say that this type of software is an asset class based upon private key infrastructure. That's incredible. What we've done over the last 10 years is we've proven that a kind of cryptography-based infrastructure can act as a replacement to the traditional banking system and the traditional Fed for doing financial transactions at small scale, right? Because the number of people that have access to it today is relatively small still versus the global economy. And now the question for the next 10 years is, can we get that to scale to everyday people? And that's what happened with the internet itself, right? In the 80s, the number of people that had access to the internet was very, very small. In the mid 90s, it started to get used for commercial applications. A lot of people were worried at the time that it wouldn't scale, right? A lot of very smart people who worked on the internet said, hey, what we're doing will not scale. ultimately did because we fixed the software, we fixed the hardware. And I think that that's what has to happen next for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And that's one of the reasons I'm also very bullish on having lots of different cryptocurrencies out there, is that we don't want to basically test all these new technologies on a blockchain whose asset is worth $100 billion. We want to use competing technologies that may even die eventually to test new and innovative ideas, which is where a lot of these so-called altcoins come in. So we had this, kind of first 10 years, prove that it works, prove that it can't be hacked, prove that lots of people can use it. Now harden it, which is what we did the last few years, made it, even more secure, increased transaction throughput. Now it really has to scale somehow so that everyone can use it, whether it's through technologies like Lightning or on-chain scaling, whatever, through custodied services like what Abra provides, so that you can have kind of a crypto-based bank account. We have to take it to the next level so that this technology is accessible to everyone. You mentioned, maybe it's accessible to my mother, your mother, people who don't understand the technology, but will understand when the value of their bank account goes to zero because the government keeps printing money.
100%. And I think there's two parts I want to discuss. I would say one is around adoption. And I think the other kind of falls into it, which I would say maybe some governmental kind of outlook on it. Like, do the superpowers of the world really want adoption? Like, are they going to let that slide? Like, is this something they actually want?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned earlier, I ran a campaign just for fun last year, called it Bitcoin for Christmas. Right. And it was like, how do I dumb down Bitcoin, like for grandma, right? Like everybody makes the joke. Can you go to, you go to Thanksgiving dinner and your family members ask you about Bitcoin, right? And no one knows about it. You look at the market cap. I'm looking at it right now. The market cap of Bitcoin is $162 billion, right? So sometimes I like to theorize and say, okay, what would happen tomorrow if every human on the planet bought $100 in Bitcoin? Right. I think fundamentally within 24 to 48 hours, you would see a massive shift. Right. And then you kind of extrapolate out from that and say, OK, what would happen if people put, like, let's say 60-year-olds plus put $5,000, $10,000 into Bitcoin at scale, and they let it sit there for 5 years. Right. So there was actual volume that was, taking product off the market. Right. And had a real price factor.
Sure.
So on one side, I think there's an adoption element, right? Now, I think when you look at who owns it now, I would say, I don't have the hard data in front of me. I would say it's kind of skewed towards technologically advanced, maybe the people with like a little bit of anarchism in them, right? Like maybe a little bit of like technologists.
Certainly libertarianism, I would say.
Yeah,
not all
there you go.
But yeah, certainly I'd say libertarian bent to it, right?
Add Ron Paul
Right.
to this conversation next, right? So when I think about grandma, like you kind of hit the roadblock where it says like you need the fiat on ramp, right? Yeah. And like, what are those roadblocks you think that like governments are putting in place that kind of stop adoption? Like, do you think that there is a green light, which is like, we want our populations to accumulate cryptocurrency or we don't, and that it is easy enough for people to kind of adopt?
I don't think governments are the biggest impediment to crypto adoption, right? People who really want Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, Ethereum, have put themselves through whatever minimal pain they've had to go through to get it. I think we overestimate how governments spend time on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I don't think they care that much, honestly. I think certain regulators in the banking system, people focus on things like custody and ICOs, particularly ICOs in the past couple of years, or IEOs, whatever we call them now. I think those people look at raising money from the public and retail investors as a little bit different. So I do think those governments focus on this. I think most of the issues with cryptocurrency adoption are basically two primary things. What is it? And why do I need it? That's kind of one big bucket, right? So grandma says, I don't know what this is. I understand what gold is. I don't understand what Bitcoin is. And that's 10 years later, most people have heard of it, but they still don't understand exactly what it is, right? Even computer scientists don't understand exactly what it is. But even at a more rudimentary level, most of the public still doesn't understand what it is or why they would want it or what it does for them. The second bucket is, okay, well, even if I do understand in some way, let's just say my rudimentary understanding is, oh, it's kind of like digital gold, right? I can store it on my computer, I can store it on my phone, I can use it as a digital replacement for gold to store my wealth. Let's say people understand that. Now the question is, how do I use it? How do I get it? Is it easy to acquire? You know, what about all these fluctuations in price? So then there's that kind of consumerization aspect of it, which I would posit hasn't really even started yet, right? Because we're still in that what is it phase of laying roads so that we can say, yeah, it's digital gold. It's very hard to say it's digital gold until you've built an infrastructure that is analogous to what you would have in the gold world, right? Because you have all kinds of commodity trading houses that deal with gold. You have derivatives. You have, you know, the traditional mining capabilities for gold. And we need to build all of those capabilities around Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in order to have this kind of consumerization of it over time. And we'll see if that happens, because that's not the mode we're in right now. Right now, we're in this mode where what's happening with Bitcoin is that it's becoming this kind of new asset class for trading, right? Just like gold and oil and other, you know, other asset classes. So we'll see if that consumerization happens over time, but a lot of things have to happen, right? The average person doesn't think that, oh, if I don't have the cash in my hand, it's not my cash. To some degree, that's true because of the way fractional reserve banking works. But there's a lot of people who think that, oh, if it's not your keys, it's not your crypto, right? Meaning you can't give your Bitcoin to somebody else to hold. That's not true. Most people who are operating in the Bitcoin world have someone else holding that Bitcoin, right? Companies like Abra, other exchanges, other wallets, whoever. And so over time, right, you're going to see a mass adoption of cryptocurrency, in my opinion. But the first generation of mass adoption is going to be via services that manage your crypto for you. And they're going to have to make it very much bank-like in terms of its ease of use in order to get people into it. Otherwise, it is simply not going to happen for the average consumer. And so we're not there yet, but I think the next 5 years, we'll see lots of startups, lots of existing banks, lots of other companies try to get into that space to make this cryptocurrency world adoptable by the average consumer.
Got it. There's a few other things I want to get to here, but I think on the point you just brought up, it kind of inspired a question in me, which, you know, I thought about for a while. You know, I would say, how do we think about custody, right? And if I remove this from the blockchain element, right? Like our team, for example, we're helping, you know, startups we invest in or projects we work on, right? That aren't necessarily financial based, but blockchain, right? So let's say background check on blockchain. Right. So it's like, I'm going to put my driver's license and I always ask people, I say, hey, well, not all people, but say anybody under 30, I say, where's your birth certificate? Where is your social security card? Ask anyone under 30 where their birth certificate or social security card are. They'll tell you it's at their parents' house in a safe. Yeah. It's at their parents' house in a file cabinet somewhere. Right. So then I ask them, why do you keep those documents there, right? What and I'm not even sure they realize why they keep them there anymore, but it's like when I was, I'm 34, when I was raised, it was like, my mom's like, no, you keep your birth certificate here and your social security card here, because if you lose this, it's bad for you, right? So I can see this mentality where we take custody seriously enough to leave a piece of paper at our family's house in a safe, because we don't, as growing adults, like trust ourselves to like carry it, right? Or it's a document we access infrequently enough that it's not a burden to have to like call mom when you need your social security card, like as you apply for a new job every 3-4 years, right?
Sure. I mean, you can keep that stuff on Dropbox, right? I mean, that's what a lot of people do now. I think that it's very unfortunate to one degree that this whole kind of space has evolved with the word custody, because it really basically pigeonholes us in traditional kind of financial services as opposed to treating this like software. I mean, we don't think of Dropbox as a custody service. It's a storage service for your ones and zeros. I mean, you can put documents online, you store them online, right? At the end of the day, there's if you're going to outsource Bitcoin to someone else for your needs, they need to be able to do two things for you. They need to be able to store it, which is effectively Dropbox, and they need to be able to execute transactions for you, which is transaction processing, which is digitally signing something with a private key and then publishing that to a blockchain. Right? We had this word custody sounds ominous, like somebody's storing my document, my birth certificate, or somebody's storing my gold, or somebody's storing my stock certificates. It's closer to Dropbox than it is to what you would do at a safety deposit box in a bank. Now, the requirements are different. You're less concerned about what gets hacked at Dropbox, maybe, than you are about what gets hacked from your Bitcoin stash.
Well, would you leave your Bitcoin private key in Dropbox?
You can, if you know what you're doing, because you can basically
would you?
I'm not going to answer that because I don't tell people what I do. But if you understand the math,
would you recommend it to a family member?
No, but that's my point. Is that you have to do different things to secure the documents the digital documents you're storing on Dropbox versus the private keys you would store somewhere else. So, I only have an issue with this word custody because it's created this kind of illusion of legal issues that, in my opinion, aren't really there. And so companies like Abra, companies like BitGo, companies that provide different levels of crypto management, or let's call it custody for people, obviously have to do things that a company like Dropbox doesn't have to do for storing copies of your PowerPoint files. But the basic idea is still the same. Don't get hacked.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not that complicated from a very basic perspective. And so a lot of times,
and we only have again, I already knew before we started, we could probably talk for 2 hours, and there's a bunch of stuff coming next week, by the way. You'll be surprised. We're bringing on a bunch of industry leaders. We have like 100 interviews coming, all the schools. So I think maybe we continue this conversation in a variety of lights.
Sure.
But I think 2 points. One, I want to hear about Abra because I feel like you're trying to solve a lot of these issues. But I guess when you think about custody, do you think people, like in the same way, like when people have a wallet, like Bitcoin wallet, right? It's like if I lose my wallet, I lose my cash, right? Like I'm not gonna get it back. And do you believe that there's, because I think we've gotten so used to, I have this account, it could be my bank account or my Facebook account or my email account. And the worst case scenario is I lose my password. I reset my password with like a very minimal amount of requirements to kind of get to that point. What burden should people really be forced to maintain, and how is Abra kind of looking to help on that?
If we care about mass global adoption, we meaning those of us who are working on this problem, care about mass consumer adoption of Bitcoin, you can't put any onus on any consumer to understand wallets, private keys, or any of this nonsense, right? It's too complicated. It's necessary in the background. If you had to understand what a TCP/IP stack is to watch Netflix, you probably wouldn't be watching Netflix. You meaning most consumers out there. So
most people think Bitcoin is the internet. It's not the internet. It's more like TCP/IP, which is like you should never see it. It's invisible.
So the way we look at it is it's like a bank, right? We think that what the consumer needs is the equivalent of a banking service, but in Bitcoin terms. What does that mean? Well, it means that you have somebody you trust who's able to manage those keys that preserve your Bitcoin. It means maybe you can earn interest on it if you're willing to opt in to lend it out to others. It means maybe you can borrow against it if you're willing to do that. But you have a third party you trust that's willing to provide those services to you, as opposed to leaving it under the mattress or doing the digital equivalent of leaving it under the mattress, which for most people is going to be a really bad idea.
Tell me about Abra. And
Sure.
again, we could talk for hours. I want to talk with you again. You're smart.
Yeah, let's do it. So
I'm like barely as smart. So tell me about Abra.
So Abra is one of the leading services out there for making Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies accessible to the average consumer, the average retail investor. We provide a very simple iPhone and Android application for smartphones that allows you to buy, store, sell, hold, exchange over 100 different cryptocurrencies. We have hundreds of thousands of users in hundreds of countries. We're constantly adding more cryptocurrencies. We're adding more ways to deposit money from the banking system into the application. People can deposit their existing Bitcoin in to store it in Abra and also convert it to other currencies. Actually, you can deposit over 100 different currency types, cryptocurrencies into Abra and convert them to different altcoins or other cryptocurrencies, or convert altcoins back to Bitcoin or Ether, whatever you like. We processed billions of transactions, billions of dollars in transactions across hundreds of thousands of wallets, and lots of happy users. So our goal is to be the go-to place for all things cryptocurrency for the average consumer over time. And so you're going to see lots of additional services in the investing space, lending space, payments world, all taking advantage of the infrastructure that Abra has built and providing more and more services to our users in the cryptocurrency space.
All right. And if you were to boil down, like, would you say is like the 1, 2, 3 killer features that you guys built in that really enable that?
Yeah, our users constantly say it is way easier to get access to crypto with Abra than any other service they provide. They can install the app, either enter a credit card or bank details, and have cryptocurrency in their wallet in like less than 10 minutes. It seems like no other service makes it really that easy to just get going in almost any country in the world. And the second thing we hear is that Abra's support for lots of different cryptocurrencies is way deeper than any other smartphone app out there. And we pride ourselves in basically going very deep when understanding what's the latest and greatest in the crypto world is to make that available to our users. And we don't just focus on the US. We have, US is about half our business and the other half is spread across dozens of countries.
Man, so many questions I want to ask you. And real quick, 30 seconds. I can't even ask this in 30 seconds. We have about 5 minutes here, but in a minute, what are the differences you see regulatory, like from geography to geography?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, in the US, the states basically have started to opine over the last couple of years on what it means to manage other people's cryptocurrency holdings. Lots of countries are still in the figured out mode. Even some states like California doesn't yet regulate holding cryptocurrency, but for someone else, but New York does, right? So you have to go in the US on a state by state basis, but also federal regulation basis via the Treasury Department. Then you have to look at other governments like in Europe or in Asia. And every country has their own perspective on this. In Mexico, for example, there's laws. In Philippines, there's laws. And we operate in all these countries. And so we have to sometimes operate with local partners or partners that are at least are licensed if necessary to be able to hold and manage cryptocurrencies in different countries, but also hide the complexity of all of that. Just as complex, but on top, crypto is a 24/7 asset. Stocks are not, right? Gold is not traded 24/7 for most Americans. Stocks are not. You can enter an order at Robinhood on the order doesn't get executed until Monday morning when the stock market opens. You enter a buy for Bitcoin on Sunday evening, the order is executed in real time. So we have to operate a 24/7 service infrastructure. And so anyway, all these things basically point to lots of legal overhead and compliance overhead. Money laundering is another one where we have to spend a lot of time and resources.
Got it. Well, hey, like I mentioned before, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I want to find a way to pick it back up. I think later this week we should maybe even talk more about custody. We'd like to hear more of your thoughts and kind of adoption and how you guys are changing it. Can potentially even be another conversation.
Sure.
Last thing, and I'm kind of asking everybody this, and then I got maybe 3 minutes here, but there's going to be, I would say, 7,000 students watching you talk right now. And, these students are comprised from top universities and their blockchain clubs and the CS departments, and data science departments. And I'll preface it with this. One of the things that makes me laugh is I guess I'm kind of in the blockchain world nowadays. So I go talk to most people, and it's just a lot of pessimism, right? Like, go talk to some guy who's been in blockchain for 6 years, and he is, they had dealt with ICOs and some project that failed, right? It's just like, there's a little bit of pessimism in the space now. Why I love working with the universities is that I'll hop on a call with 50 students, 20-year-olds. They never experienced the ICO market. Right. It's like, I'm going to build a blockchain application I'm going to build an application and I want to build it on blockchain. Why not? Right. So what would your message to the students be?
I would say, if you want to basically think about this new kind of decentralized world where we can basically build these applications that don't have to sit on a single server like Bitcoin, it really requires more of a holistic, different perspective than the kind of 1990s, 2000s perspective on building, Facebook would have, right? I think you need to understand a bunch of different things. You should understand a little bit more about economics, right? You should go in and read some of the, Austrian school versus Keynesian school in economics and educate yourself a little bit. I'm not saying people should all become libertarian anarchists in order to get into this space, but you should understand why this software was created in the first place and the problems it was trying to solve. Not every problem lends itself to internet scale decentralization. Decentralization comes at a cost. So blockchain for the sake of blockchain, but that decentralization plays a critical role in the problems you're trying to solve. Otherwise, you may end up in that kind of disappointed mode that you talked about before.
You definitely can't build blockchain applications for the sake of blockchain. I think the industry has learned this by now, and it's the truth. I don't think there's actually. I mean, at the end of the day, to be honest, I don't think every application is a blockchain application.
Of course not. I mean,
it's a signature. Like, signatures are hugely important to this entire thing, right? Like, just closing out that element, whether it be custody, whether you keep it on a piece of paper or it's in a Dropbox, right? Whether you are a supply chain company or a financial services company,
you can make it really simple. Bitcoin is the most expensive, inefficient transaction processing system ever created by men. That is the price of internet scale decentralization, to create a system that can't be shut down. That's the price we have to pay. And so if you don't understand that and you want to use that technology to do other things, it's like going to bat with holding the bat with one hand and picking the other hand and put it behind your back. It doesn't make sense. So dig in and understand that, and you'll be way better off for it when you try to build your own services that take advantage of this blockchain technology.
Well, I think it's one of the first things people really have to come to grasp with, which is like, it's not easy building blockchain. Like, I think there's a lot of disappointment in the space. Like, why aren't we there yet? Right? Like, why does Bitcoin suck? Or everything's better than Bitcoin? Or this is old school? Or, right? It's like, it's not like for any serious engineer that steps to the table, they're like, yeah, that's not easy. Right? Then for the average person who's like not written 100,000 lines of code, they don't understand the interest, right? Let's say, man, like, to have validation from multiple decentralized data devices kept in sync, right, on top of like cost of output or right, like network efficiency. I see it from kind of running a team of developers or investing in projects. And I've come to terms with it 2 years ago. I finally came to the conclusion and said, this shit is not easy.
Right.
Like, it needs time to breathe, right? So we have to be doing the right things. We have to invest in education at an early stage. We have to invest in projects without short term, right? Not just ICOs, like take cash and right. So
we need the
anyways,
next generation of computer scientists and economists to get equally excited about this and both understand what I'm saying from their own perspectives. That's what we need.
100%. All right, everybody. I want to talk to this guy for like another hour, so it's not going to happen. I'm going to be saying this a lot this week, and I'm going to bring it back for something else. I'm going to try.
I look forward to it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Bill Barhydt, give your Abra plug. Last minute.
So go to abra.com from your phone or from your PC, download Abra from the App Store. You'll be up and running in a couple of minutes. It's everything crypto: buy, sell, hold, exchange. Just download the app. And I'm on Twitter, Bill Barhydt. I'm there all the time helping people get going. You can ask me questions, but we have a huge team that's here to support you any way we can.
Awesome, guys. All the links are there. You'll be able to find them.
Right on.
Bill, it was very nice talking with you. Let's keep this conversation going. And I think there's a lot of students that are going to appreciate what you said. And hopefully we hear more from you here the next week. And I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Yeah, same here. Look forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it, Bill.
Stay tuned to learn more about student interest in blockchain technology. Reimagine 2020.